Hello, welcome to BuzzLine, the weekly show about Georgia Tech Yellow Jacket athletics. He is Jonathan Leifheit, publisher and czar at GoJackets.com, part of the CBS Sports Interactive family. I'm your host, John Rawl, and we're glad that you join us here on a cool day following a soggy, cool evening in Death Valley, where the Jackets fall to the Clemson Tigers 24-10. Mr. Leifheit, I'm sorry you had to endure all that.
Well, fortunately, I had my my rain slicker and my rain pants on, but it still wasn't quite enough to keep me dry. But yeah, to say that it was wet would be a little bit of an understatement. I will note that while I was wet, I was not as wet as I was in 2002 when Tropical Storm, whatever it was, came through and rained even harder for longer. When we were at Clemson. So for whatever reason, I think even our last visit to Clemson, guess what? It rained. So it seems like lately there's been a lot of wet games at Clemson. I'm not sure what that's all about, but
you're saying instead of building a $60 million complex for their players to play wiffle ball, maybe they should build a dome over Death Valley.
Well, that probably would have helped us last night a whole lot, that's for sure.
Please, Dabo, let's make that happen. Anyway, we'll have some kind of session here to get everybody through this rough loss, and a loss that certainly puts the Jackets out of contention for ACC title berth. So we'll look at that and what the Jackets can do to salvage a good rest of the year. And we'll turn our attention to the Who's, as UVA is the next opponent for the Jackets, and a road trip to Charlottesville is in store for Paul Johnson's program. So stick with us. We're at Buffalo's Cafe, and coming, I'll tell you some exciting things going on here when we get right back on BuzzLine. All good?
All good. I've just about almost got the shares done. So
all right.
If I open those pages up in advance, it works out well.
Okay, good. See, we're learning. We're going to get this thing down because ESPN's ready to put us on.
Yeah, I was getting calls from them last night.
We're back at Buffalo's Cafe coming. This is BuzzLine, where we come here each week to do our show and yell out, "What's the good word?"
To hell with Georgia.
All right, yes. Buffalo's Cafe, where everyone is family. Buffalo's Cafe in Cumming is located at 1175 Buford Highway. As you roll along at the posted speed limit of, I think, 65. I'm sure most people go a little bit more than that.
There's a speed limit on 400?
I think so. As you go on 400, at exit 14 is where you need to get off and head toward Buford. And we're right here at Buffalo's Cafe, where you have Bash Night, all-you-can-eat wings every Monday and Wednesday, $14.99. And they tell me that there's some kind of professional football game that happens on Mondays, so you can come here and watch a little professional football and have a wonderful time and not spend a whole lot of money.
Well, if you like Monday Night Football, this will be the place to be to watch it.
That's right. And the Jackets were part of Monday Night Football one time this year, and that didn't turn out too good. So no more Monday night for a while for Georgia Tech.
I would agree with that, and I'm fine with that, although I sure would love to have a rematch on a Monday night with Tennessee at this point. That's for sure.
I'd like to see that series continue on because, of course, it has a lot of history between Georgia Tech and Tennessee playing back in the 80s and 70s, of course, when they were both in the conference of the SEC together was – a lot of history between those two programs. All right, a lot of history between the Jackets and the Clemson Tigers. And here of late, it's not a good history for Georgia Tech.
No, it's not. I think the only win we've had since 2010, following the 2009 win over them in the championship series, I think the only win we've had is 2011, which granted was a great one because I believe they came in ranked number 3 in the country in that game, and Georgia Tech at home upset them 31-17. But other than that, it's been not a good time. And I'll be honest, the last 3 years, they've pretty much not only have they beaten the Jackets, but they have kicked their butts up and down the field. And as a Georgia Tech fan, it's kind of disheartening to watch the domination that they're showing right now.
Didn't Deshaun Watson come in as a freshman in the game against Georgia Tech?
You know what? He did, and I forgot about 2000
Tech win.
And I forgot all about 2014 like an idiot. So we've had 2 wins in the last few years.
Yeah, Taj Boyd got hurt or something like that.
No, that was Watson got hurt. He actually had come in. He had been out for part of that season due to a wrist injury, and then he came in, and on a completely freak play, non-contact, Georgia Tech didn't even hit him. He planted his foot and boom, gone. So he lost. I think it was
Watson was playing quarterback.
Right.
Okay. But that wasn't because Taj Boyd maybe was hurt himself?
No, not that game. That was after Boyd had left.
Okay. Well, I don't have my Clemson facts down, but I do know they won against Georgia Tech in 2017, 24-10, in a game where the Jackets early on fumbled the ball, and we're not going to say fumbles were the reason Georgia Tech lost this game.
Nope.
So what was the reason?
Well, it came down to execution. I mean, if you kind of look at what happened, I watched the offensive line rotation. Let's talk about them. Will Bryan. They pulled him a couple times, put in Bailey Ivermeyer. They moved tackles around. They did all kinds of stuff trying to get kind of a blocking, some semblance of blocking. I felt like the middle did a decent job, but the edges weren't so great. So that was one thing. And then the second thing, in my opinion, outside of the fumbles, Taquan Marshall had, I think, his worst game of the year. And you can credit the Clemson defense if you want, but he did some things, and we'll hear from Coach Johnson on this. One example, you guys probably remember there was a screen pass that they threw, and it ended up going to Ricky June. Well, if you listen to what Coach Johnson had to say, it was supposed to go to the other side of the field, and Ricky June was probably the most surprised person there to get the ball thrown to him. So, you can make mistakes against Clemson and beat them, but you can't make as many mistakes as the Jackets did. And Taquan it was a bad night for him. He's a great player and he's done some great things, but he did not have a good night last night. Another example, he should have given the ball on a few of the options, kept it up the middle. There was some of those misreads there. On top of that, he seemed to have a real indecision about whether to pitch the ball or keep the ball, and it ended up he had some opportunities on the edge. And when they get those opportunities, they got to hit them. And he failed to pitch it or was hesitant, and that gave them, that extra half step to get in there. So a number of things. Largely this game, is on the offense. The defense didn't play that great in the first half at all. They tightened it up pretty nicely in the second half. At that point, Clemson was just trying to hang on to the ball and play field position because they knew that Georgia Tech couldn't score.
We've got post-game audio coming up on the show from Coach Paul Johnson, but we also will hear a little bit of Taquan Marshall talking along with Corey Griffin. And I know it had to be tough for him to explain whatever he could explain post-game.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's always tough. I've been there after games with, losses with the players, and to be perfectly honest, they don't want to talk about it. Heck, if I were them, I wouldn't want to talk about it either. I don't like talking about it now.
But that's why they get paid a lot of money. I'm just kidding.
Oh, right, exactly.
That's it. That is the case with the professionals. Now,
right.
It's not going to be fair to pick on the 19, 20-year-olds that are off playing college football. But, hey, they know that the spotlight shines on them whether they win or lose. And you don't want to lose because you got to deal with press conferences when you're the loser. And you're the quarterback. The quarterback, of course, is the number one position from a publicity standpoint.
Yep, absolutely. So, I mean, yeah, if you're gonna play the position, you got to be prepared to take it. So, and he usually does a pretty good job. He stands up, and Taquan will completely acknowledge when he makes mistakes. I love the kid to death. He's absolutely fantastic, and I mean that as a person, not just as a quarterback.
Yeah, and you called him earlier on the first show of this year. You kind of had your sneaky suspicion that he would be the starting quarterback.
We had more than a sneaky suspicion. So,
come on, go ahead, brag on yourself.
All right, we had inside information that we worked hard to get, that we knew he was going to be.
And you can only get that kind of information if you're a subscriber to GoJackets.com.
There you go,
and that makes it all worth it right there. All right, we'll take a timeout on BuzzLine. Come back, we'll go into the game with Clemson a little bit more, try to make some sense out of this beat down Clemson put down. Mainly because of Mother Nature, they're beat down on everybody, actually, fans, students, the band, everybody in orange overalls.
Mother Nature gave the biggest beat down, I'll say that.
That's true. So we'll talk about it right after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Buffalo's Cafe, Cumming, Georgia. John Rawl with Jonathan Leifheit, GoJackets.com. Buffalo's Cafe, the official West Lanier Network viewing spot for Georgia Tech fans. And with a road game this weekend against the Virginia Cavaliers, we encourage everybody to come to Buffalo's Cafe, located at 1175 Buford Highway in Cumming. Wear your white and gold, cheer on the Jackets against the Hoos.
And I think the owner this past weekend indicated anybody showed up to watch the Clemson game, they were going to do the first round on Buffalo. So maybe even another possibility. I'm not sure, but
first round of
beverages.
Okay.
Beverages.
Well,
yes.
Well,
yes.
Mr. Owner of Buffalo's, a Georgia Tech alum, we're giving you a salute right now. This is delicious tea, by the way, that they offer here at Buffalo's. And you have a liking of tea, don't you?
No, I do not, actually. I actually like tea.
I'm going to check your passport and make sure you're from the South.
I like tea. The problem is when I drink tea, it makes me ill. So
it makes you TT?
It makes me like Ralph.
Okay. Well, we'll move on. But anyway, great place whether you want to drink tea. They've got good Coke here. Good
Absolutely.
Georgia Tech neighbor.
Yeah, there you go.
Do they give Coca-Cola to students?
I believe Coca-Cola is the beverage of choice on the Georgia Tech campus, and it's the only beverage available in any of the fine dining establishments on the institute.
I mean, literally, the powers that be at Coca-Cola look down on the institute.
Yeah, they also look down with their wallets and bless them with a lot of doggone money too.
Well, that's good too. Thank you, Coca-Cola, for your support of Georgia Tech sports. All right. I was in the upstate of South Carolina prior to the game against Clemson, and I was listening to 105.5 FM The Roar, which is the Clemson propaganda outlet. And I was listening to one of their shows leading up to the Georgia Tech kickoff, and actually an alum of Georgia Tech, a diehard fan, lives in Anderson, South Carolina. He called in, and I tell you, this guy must be a prophet because he called it just like it happened. He said, I love Georgia Tech, but we're not going to win. He said, Clemson's going to stuff the middle, and we're not going to be able to do anything, and we can't go to the outside edges and get any yards that way.
Yeah, he's right.
Okay.
And from that perspective, I actually thought there were some yards to be had in the middle. And a matter of fact, on the second series of the game, Kervonte Benson busts right up the middle for a 65-yard pickup, gets tackled out about the 8. Now, the problem was Georgia Tech couldn't find a way to punch that into the end zone. But I think there was some yards to be gained there, but you have to make the right reads and get them there, and they didn't do that. Now, I also note Clemson has, I think, Christian Wilkins and Dexter Lawrence, who are two of the top prospects for the pro level in the country, not just in the ACC, but in the country. So going up the middle is going to be a tough road to hoe, and when you're relying on speed to the outside, and guess what? It's raining. That didn't bode well, but nonetheless, there were some yards to be had that weren't had and could have been had, I think, in this game, and that's kind of on some of the reads and some of the players there.
And I want to, since you were there yelling "Go Jackets" all night long, for the folks who weren't there, who may have watched it on television, they can't fully appreciate how much it actually did rain. Correct?
Oh yeah,
and it didn't let up.
It rained really hard. Started about 30 minutes. I think I got to the stadium about 40 minutes before the game, and it was starting to come down. By the time kickoff happened, it was really coming down hard. It was hard to see. First half pretty much stayed pretty steady.
Yeah.
Tapered off a little bit in the third quarter, and we actually had, I would say, 15 minutes of no rain.
Not even a drizzle?
Well, no, not even a drizzle at that point. And then, and that was right around just before the fourth quarter break. By the time the fourth quarter kicked in, the next wave was coming in, and it was back to the same old stuff that we were getting. So it wasn't like dumping inches per hour out there, but it was heavy and it was steady.
Well, one thing about rain games or rain being in the forecast, as a fan of Paul Johnson, he doesn't do ball caps very well.
Oh, was he wearing a ball cap?
Yeah. He wears ball caps only when it rains or threatening rain, and he's like me. He's got a big noggin, and
so do I.
The hats don't really fit him too well.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll need to work on getting him a size 8.5.
He needs to wear a cowboy hat like Bum Phillips.
Oh, there you go. Or Jerry Glanville.
Yeah, I forgot about Glanville.
Yeah, I don't think that would be a good look for him.
Yeah. Were you wearing a hat?
Absolutely. I had a ball cap on, and then I also I mentioned I had my rain jacket, which was pretty much a yellow rubber suit. I looked like a big banana, to be honest. It was kind of funny. And then that one had a hoodie on it, so I actually had the hood on it going over, which kept my head mostly dry, okay. and then the ball cap kept the kind of the drips out of my face, so I still got a little wet, and it soaked back in there. By the end of the night, I think the bottom 18 inches of my jeans were completely soaked. The front of my sweatshirt that I was wearing was damp. It wasn't like soaking, but it was damp. And then around my pockets where my rain pants kind of opened up a little bit, I was also pretty wet as well. But I saw some people that were a lot wetter than I were at the end of it, but nonetheless.
Well, let me know if you break into hypothermia or any kind of after effect of being doused with rain.
I think we're all good right now.
All right. Well, unfortunately, the rain did not help in Georgia Tech's case. Any absolute example, in your opinion, of the field being affected by the rain that cost Georgia Tech?
I don't think there was anything that cost Georgia Tech any more than it cost Clemson. They had the same things. There was no one play where I can say, oh, I can attribute that to the rain. I mean, other than the normal slipping and sliding, but. The outside game was a little tougher because those A-backs like to hit the corner, plant, and go. You can't really do that, so that a little bit limited things. And Clemson had the same thing. They like to throw they like to throw stuff out to the outside and plant, kind of get the guy off balance. And you know what? They were slipping a little bit themselves. So I don't think the weather was an advantage or disadvantage for either team.
Well, let me ask a question that a lot of people really get into. I am not one of these people. I'm not a sneakerhead. And so this is applicable because of the rain and the wet field. But also I noticed during the game, I guess I'd never paid attention before, your cleats are a big deal in a rain environment.
Absolutely.
And being a Russell Athletic program, well, Russell Athletic doesn't make shoes.
Correct.
So I saw players wear Nike shoes, but is there a standard for the Tech football players?
I believe it is actually in Nike in terms of the shoes at this point. Now, obviously, next year, that'll be Adidas. But currently, the shoe provider for the football team, I think, largely is Nike.
Okay, well, I didn't line up all the players and look at their feet.
Yep.
But I saw most of the players I saw wearing Nike, and I didn't know how that worked since.
Yep. That's the way they do since Russell doesn't do shoes. Yep. The basketball team is also Nike shoes as well. So that's what they've been using. Obviously, that'll all switch to Adidas as well. Now the baseball team was with Mizuno, and they'll be moving over, I think, a little sooner to Adidas. So
okay, all right. And then maybe this spring you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they'll do that this spring or not, but they had been with Mizuno doing a lot of work, a lot of stuff with them.
Okay. Well, we cover everything here on BuzzLine, from shoes to heads to everything in between.
Absolutely.
We'll take a break, come back. We'll hear from the head coach of the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, Paul Johnson, talking postgame. This is BuzzLine from Buffalo's Cafe coming. All right, Facebook Live, getting a clip here of Coach Johnson lined up. Everything good?
We're good.
Technologically speaking?
Absolutely, we're working. I was just checking our feed on the GoJackets.com forums, and everything was working fine.
All right, somebody say feed?
Feed.
I'm getting hungry.
Yeah, I am getting hungry too. I left Clemson this morning and had a banana for breakfast and then very little for lunch, so I'm ready to chow down, John. I'm ready for some wings.
Well, let me make your stomach tremble a little bit more than normal, and tremble in a good way. You were telling me last week about Walhalla, South Carolina fried chicken. So as my computer reboots here, tell people about this place in case they've never been.
Yeah, so Walhalla, South Carolina. I think it's about, I don't know.
About 25 minutes.
Yeah,
northwest
25 minutes,
of Clemson.
15 miles-ish
Yeah.
away from there.
Toward Toccoa.
Toward Toccoa, back toward the state line. It's the first exit, Highway 11, I believe you take. First exit into South Carolina. There is a place called the Steakhouse Cafeteria that is owned by, I think that place has been in existence for over 50 years. It's not the original owners, but the folks that own it have had it for at least 25, but probably even more than that at this point. Wonderful couple. And they have great food there, and then on top of that, their fried chicken is just the bomb, and I love it. And
you had it this weekend?
You betcha I did. My friends Chuck and Christy, who live on the lake up there in Hartwell, before they headed over to the motorhome to see us, they picked up a big batch of it, and I ended up having several pieces of it, and made my belly a happy belly.
Because they sometimes bring it to Georgia Tech home games.
They have done that in the past, and sometimes we do that. Haven't done it in a few years. By and large, we save it for the Clemson games at this point. Just is a lot better when it's a little more fresher than waiting for 3 hours.
Okay, well, keep that in mind if you're ever in that part of South Carolina, because I love me some good chicken, and honestly, really good chicken. Other than at Buffalo's Cafe, of course, is not the easiest thing to find. I mean, every chicken is usually good, but it's not like, oh, my gosh, good.
No, this is, oh, my gosh, good.
Yeah, and Buffalo's Cafe has that kind of effect on people, the oh, my gosh, good.
There you go.
So that is good news to hear as we get ready to start back our segment here. I'm just making sure we got everything good with Coach Paul Johnson. So when did you have that chicken?
Saturday. Had it for lunch. That was my lunch and dinner.
Well, I'm jealous. Maybe that was the only highlight of your Saturday in Clemson.
Oh, right now that is definitely the highlight. Oh, great. Yeah, we can talk about that too. Did you note to them we started 3 freshmen?
What was the exhibition game or something?
Yeah, no, we can talk about it.
Okay.
We'll need to. Just about ready here?
Yeah. Hey, we're back at BuzzLine with Jonathan Leifheit, publisher GoJackets.com. John Rawl here. We're talking Georgia Tech's loss to number 7 Clemson in a rain-soaked game at Memorial Stadium in Clemson, South Carolina. 24-10 Clemson, South Carolina, formerly known as Calhoun, South Carolina.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it was Calhoun all the way up until after World War II. I actually knew that, but I found recently a road map from the 1930s, and it has Calhoun there.
Do we know why they changed the name?
Well, probably because everybody was calling it Clemson anyway, just like Auburn officially was Alabama Polytechnic Institute until 1959.
Right.
And it was API, but people still called it Auburn, and so they finally just said, well.
I call it Clemson without a lake.
But I was going to tell you that it was called, on this road map that I have from the 30s, it's really fascinating because I was looking at it, and there's this gigantic line that separates the map east of Atlanta, even before Athens, or I shouldn't say Athens, Winder. I live in Hall County, and there's a separation between Atlanta and Hall County. You know what that big line is?
No.
It's the time zone.
Oh, okay.
In the 30s, there was a different time zone between Atlanta and 20 miles east of Atlanta.
I did not know that either.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And so I don't know when it changed, but at one point there were different time zones in Georgia.
I know that they had a lot of time zones where they had various, not just hour shifts, but like half-hour shifts and stuff like that. It was pretty crazy back there, and that's when they started standardizing some of that. So,
well, of course, Atlanta being a media hub, even in the 30s, I mean, it had to be real difficult for people that live 15, 20, 30 miles away to listen to Atlanta radio because they didn't have TV. And hear them talk about what time it was, and it wouldn't be applicable to them. But anyway, kind of an interesting thing about history here. We're just trying to keep from talking about the Clemson game.
Yeah, we're doing a good job, John.
Yes. Remember
so why don't we let Coach Johnson talk
we will.
about that?
Do you remember when they used to have a writer's strike up in Hollywood and television?
Right.
David Letterman had a network time killer segment. Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
His writers were on strike, so he would spend about 20 minutes of each show killing time, and it was pretty funny. And that's kind of what we're doing. Filibuster would be the term in political speak. All right, Paul Johnson did speak after the loss to Clemson, and we're going to go into the locker room and hear the head coach of the Jackets now talking for a moment about his team and the loss there in Clemson.
Clearly it didn't go the way we would have liked. I think a really good football team, and we didn't play very well. And it comes back to me, starts with me. I thought we were ready to play, but clearly we weren't. So, we couldn't win any one-on-one plays, any one-on-one blocks. Or if we did, not many. Really struggled offensively. And, defensively we missed a ton of tackles and gave up some big plays and dig ourselves a hole. Actually played decent in the second half on defense, but we were so far behind it really didn't matter.
Questions for Coach Johnson?
Paul, you were 3 for 15 on third down, and you always talk about trying to be third and short, and that didn't happen tonight.
No, we probably were less than 20% on option reads. We missed a lot of reads, and when we did get them right, it was like popcorn. And some of the stuff, was just ridiculous. We turned guys loose. Those two throwback plays were supposed to be jailbreak screens coming back across the middle. I can't explain why we do some of the stuff we do here, but we do.
It seemed like Quan struggled with the reads, and it seemed like the early pressure kind of maybe got in his head.
Well, the first series we tried to take some of it off of him by doubling the read key and just kind of hand it off, and we got a little first down going and got the thing going and fumbled the ball. And then, of course, like in years past, boom, boom, 2 plays, 3 plays later, it's a touchdown. And you're digging out from behind.
Other than that fumble, Cravante seemed to do.
Cravante ran hard, yeah. I think he ran hard. There wasn't a whole lot of room in there. We had a hard time cutting them off, too.
And that was Georgia Tech head football coach Paul Johnson speaking after the 24-10 setback to Clemson. Jonathan Leifheit, GoJackets.com. I got a question for you. Maybe he's speaking in code there, or maybe I just don't have a sense of humor, but he mentioned it was like popcorn. What's he talking about?
Well, I think I'm not 100% sure what he means by that, but I think what he's saying is things are just popping up all over the place.
Okay.
So in terms of people blowing assignments and stuff like that, just constant. There just was a constant explosion of bad things happening on the field, and that's kind of I think that's what he means.
Well, 3 out of 15 on third downs.
Yep.
If my arithmetic is correct, that's about a 20% change.
Yes, and it's ironic that you say that, and then he also mentioned that they only made about 20% of the reads, the correct reads. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned this earlier that Taquan had a bad night, and part of what was that I based it on was what I saw from the stands as best I could see it, because it was not easy for me to see it. But there was a few plays down on my end of there that I saw some, you should have given it to the B-back or you should have pitched it, that type of thing. But, also based on Coach Johnson's observations there, and he clearly did not have a good game from a read perspective.
Okay, so the question is, it seemed like the most exciting part of the game for Georgia Tech was when Jordan came in off the bench.
Well, yeah, and it's funny. I've already heard people say, we never adjust. Well, guess what? He adjusted. Taquan wasn't playing well. able to execute his game, so they brought Matthew Jordan in and started running midline, and lo and behold, what happened? Boom, 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 boom. And then Jordan gets hurt, back out of the game, back to Marshall. We did score. That was actually the drive we did score on. But at that point, then Jordan couldn't come back in, and so it was back to the normal.
To him?
I'm not 100% sure. It looked to me like he hurt one of his legs. It looked like, I think it was his right leg, based on how he was limping off the field. But we won't get any kind of word on exactly what that is until later.
And kudos to Marshall with that scamper for the touchdown.
Yeah, that was a good play call. They did a perfect execution. If you watch that, everybody did exactly what they were supposed to. A lane opened up to the right, and then down at the end zone, I think it was Ricky June was just blocking his butt off, and that allowed Marshall to kind of scamper in there and get right in on the goal line before another Clemson player arrived to knock him back. But by that point, he actually just broke the plane in the end zone.
With Matthew Jordan, I mean, we're picking on Marshall for having a really bad read night. Did you see that Jordan was making the correct reads? And that's why
he was.
Really?
He was. And he was running more of a midline type of option, and he gave it when he was supposed to, and he kept it when he was supposed to, and made some plays.
When was the last time he played prior to Clemson?
I'm not sure. He probably has played in another game or two, but of course, last time he played extensively was last year against Virginia Tech.
Now, didn't we hear that he was Mr. Academic guy, and that's all he really cared about was academics?
I don't. That wasn't him.
Okay, sorry. I'm sure he does care about academics.
He does care, but that's not why he's. I would say he wants to play. He wants to be on the field. He wants to win.
Well, I mean, whoever this person, I'm sorry, I'm mistaken on who it is. They want to play, but it's okay if they don't play because they're doing so well academically that they've got.
I'm not sure who you're referring to.
Maybe it was a dream I had. I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, but anyway, the Jackets did find a little life. Was it too late after they did decide to put Jordan in there? Was it too late?
At that point, it was getting too late. I mean, had they been able to pull that off, the defense was making stops. I think they had, it would have been kind of tight, but I think it might have been able to work, but probably was a little too late. But, you make the change when you feel like you need to make the change, and that's kind of what they did.
All right. Well, we will talk more about Marshall when we come back. We'll actually hear post-game audio from Taquan as well as Corey Griffin as they called up with GoJackets.com following the loss to Clemson. We'll be right back from Buffalo's Cafe. Stay with us, y'all.
I guess.
Gotcha.
So.
BuzzLine, back we are at Buffalo's Cafe, coming, and we encourage you to come here with a great, friendly wait staff awaiting you. When you walk in the door, they've got a smile on their face, and they're ready to say, where can we seat you? We want you to come in and have a great time. They've got all these television sets. In fact, 27 TVs. Not a bad seat in the house when you come to Buffalo's Cafe. And honestly, Jonathan, when we do this show each week, I love looking at you. But
no, you don't.
But sometimes there's a television right off the side of your profile that catches my attention. Maybe not on that exact thing there. Usually if there's a game going on. So don't take offense if my eye's looking a little weird.
I'd rather you weren't looking at me anyway. You're a little creepy sometimes, just for the record.
All right, just for that, I'm going to slide closer to you. Georgia Tech loses to Clemson this past weekend, 24-10, in a game that was really not even that close until the final moments. 24-3 was a large part, I guess, there in the second half. And just a terrible offensive performance, a terrible fan setting with the rain. And okay, let's not forget, Clemson was coming into this game after an open week and after a loss to Syracuse, a shocking loss. So how much motivation did the Tigers have to come out and have a good performance?
Well, I mentioned this last week. They were they still believe that they're a strong candidate for the playoff. And when you lose one game, you better not lose a second, or else you're pretty much out of the playoff hunt.
And it helps when TCU and Ohio or Penn State goes down.
Right, absolutely. So, here they are feeling pretty good about themselves and feeling like, hey, we can't screw up anymore. So they're going to come out pretty motivated in that regard. And second thing is they're coming off an off week. And then, as you mentioned, they are coming off a loss. And I think the stat last week that I remember kind of quoting was that Clemson has not lost 2 in a row since like 2011. And that's a pretty remarkable accomplishment in terms of that. So Dabo's done a good job of turning them around. They have a lot to play for, and I unfortunately, we were next up.
Another question coming into this game was Kelly Bryant. And there was talk that he wouldn't even play because of
concussion.
A concussion, and he also had an
ankle injury. Yeah, so he had, I think he had turned his ankle previous to Syracuse, but then really injured it pretty good in that game. Well, kind of injured it early, and then that limited him in that game, and I think that led to the hit that kind of gave him the concussion, and he was out. And, it was pretty surprising to me that he actually played in this game, because normally you're out, on the sidelines or out on the field for a couple seconds, whatever. It's usually a couple weeks before you start clearing concussion protocols. But, he did, and he went out there and played well. So
another thing, when I told you earlier in the show, I was listening to Enemy Radio traveling through the South Carolina upstate, and they said that if Bryant plays and he comes in at 100% at kickoff, well, he won't be 100% before halftime, that his health would be dwindling throughout the game because of his health issues. But
he seemed to be all right the whole game. So
maybe they were just trying to get people like me to take it easy, like, oh, this one's
in the bag.
Georgia Tech's got this one. No worries here.
No, he played the whole game healthy. Now he was out, I believe, the last series of the game, but at that point that was they were clearing the bench.
Well, we'll hear from the Georgia Tech quarterback now and defensive playmaker Corey Griffin as well. Health-wise, does Marshall have anything going on with him?
Nope.
So we can't attribute that to being the problem that he may have had?
Nope.
All right. Well, here is Taquan Marshall, and Corey Griffin talking to Rod McKenzie and others after the loss to Clemson here on BuzzLine.
We didn't get started as fast as we would like to. We also didn't play.
What'd you say?
We'd like to. I didn't play as good as I would like.
Ask you?
So, it starts with me. I really let the team down.
He was already redshirted.
I just got to come back next week ready to work and get better.
He's been here 2 or 3 years.
So I just got to make sure I'm up, and we're going to watch the film next week and flush it and get ready for Virginia.
It seemed like their talent level being a hair better on defense, a step faster than some of the other teams you played. Maybe kind of disrupted some of the rhythm with the offense. Was that kind of how you saw things in the first half?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, we knew they were a good team. They were good defensively. They've been good defensively the past couple of years. So, I mean, we knew it was going to be a challenge, but
previous games about making changes at halftime. Held him 3 points in the second half. What, if any, changes did you make?
He's a red shirt this year.
Really didn't make any changes.
Red shirt freshman. He redshirted last year.
Play well with our eyes, and guys, flew to the ball. So.
In the second half, Corey, you guys had some younger guys out there on defense, Johnny, and they kind of held their own and played well. Was there any kind of message on the sideline and you talking to guys and anything like that?
I mean, it's pretty much understood. If a guy up, and anybody goes down, you got to step up. We need you at that time, at that moment. So it's your time to perform.
In 3 quarters, I think Devontae was only had some positive yards. How does it define this program to kind of take it away from the options?
It's hard. We try to make some things happen on the perimeter, try to get the ball pitched. It's hard though. It's frustrating for me because sometimes I try to make some plays just to get the guys sparked up, but they took it away. So we just tried to get some things going, but they had our number tonight.
Okay, post-game audio there, courtesy of GoJackets.com, and we heard from the quarterback, Taquan Marshall, as well as defensive playmaker Corey Griffin, post-game after the loss to Clemson. And while I'm thinking about it, Jonathan, since we had Griffin on there representing the defense, did you see number 45 out there on the field last night?
Yes, TD Roof, I did.
Great name for an offensive playmaker, but he's on the defense. TD.
Well, but his dad is Ted.
Yeah, but TD is a.
Right.
You may not know this. This is a common term for touchdown.
You're right. I didn't know that.
But how much has he played?
He is a true freshman this year. He's largely been playing on special teams, and that was probably maybe the second time I've seen him get significant time in the game. Has a real good nose for the ball, just like his dad, and plays well. He came in there and put some pressure on the quarterback, got a couple of tackles as well. But he's been pretty good on special teams, and I think he's coming along pretty nicely on the defensive side.
And he is from right down the road here. I'm not kidding. He's from Buford, Georgia. So good news that he's getting a little plague time on the defense for Georgia Tech.
Yes, it is, and always happy to see him playing.
And as far as coaches in the game, on the other side of the field, Dabo Sweeney's son is getting a chance to play as well. He was a holder, I know, for some of the kicks.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, it's okay if you weren't. But I wonder if he's on a scholarship. I think his dad makes about $6-point-something million a year.
Yeah, he can afford it. They can make him a walk-on.
Yeah, they should. All right. Still, anything else we want to say about this Clemson loss before we move on to Virginia?
No. I think I'm tired of talking about it. I feel better. I'm not happy about it, but at least I've flushed it out of my system now.
And as my friend Regis would say, is that your final answer?
That's my final answer.
All right, well, it is just one game on the schedule, but what it does do is it cements the fact that Georgia Tech will definitely not be in the championship game in Charlotte in a couple of weeks, and that is a little painful, especially since the ACC in some ways is down this year. With some surprise teams, I'm talking, like, I shouldn't say down, but some surprises. NC State could end up being in Charlotte. Miami, did you see Miami being up there?
Well, they were picked at the beginning of the season.
But did you really feel that they would? I mean, I
felt like they were as good. I felt like Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, and Miami, that you could pick any one of those three and probably be in pretty good shape. Virginia Tech and Miami, I thought probably would be the favorite just because that's the way the media goes. But yeah, it didn't surprise me.
Well, what I meant also by down was the fact Florida State, good Lord, I don't think they're going to get to
they're not.
Yeah. And,
darn.
Yeah, that's okay, but the pundits would have always predicted them to be.
Well, they were preseason, number 2?
Yeah.
And to not make a bowl after being number 2, that's like incredible. I mean,
of course, injury had something to do with that, but hey, that's why they've got over 100 people on a roster.
You know what? I don't want to hear about injuries with them. This is a team that is a top. They quote recruit top 10 talent every single year. To lose one player at quarterback, nope, not an excuse.
Well, there's a former Florida. No, he's done playing. There was a player that left there like a year or two ago, went somewhere else and played, and I forgot. I'm getting him confused with Will Greer at
West Virginia, who
he's
went to
from
Florida.
But there was another Florida State. Was it Trickett?
No, Trickett's their offensive line coach.
Yeah, but his son
might have been
was a quarterback, and then he transferred to somewhere, I believe. And maybe he's not playing this year, but
probably wouldn't have played.
No, he played somewhere, like maybe even West Virginia. I could be wrong. My memory's slipping slightly.
Yeah.
But I'll have to Google it so that I don't feel like a complete idiot.
Okay.
We'll take a break, come back, talk about Virginia, and Jonathan's got some basketball news and notes that we're going to talk about.
Yep.
So we'll stay with us. We'll be right back at Buffalo's Cafe.
Maybe. Yeah, 3 maybe.
Welcome back to Buffalo's Cafe, located at 1175 Buford Highway. This is BuzzLine. I'm John Rawl, joined by Jonathan Leifheit, and Mr. Hickman's joined us here from the West Lanier network of Georgia Tech fans and alumni. We appreciate that, and all the folks who come out to support Georgia Tech sports here at Buffalo's Cafe. I know we had some folks in attendance for the Clemson road game, and of course we want to encourage all Georgia Tech fans to show up here for the Virginia game, which is a road game this weekend. So the Cavaliers, kind of like a soap opera, they lost early in the season, and so you expected that. And then they went on a tear. They absolutely embarrassed Boise State on the blue turf.
Yep.
And they came back and had some other surprising wins. And then here of late, they've fallen off the map. So what's going on there in Charlottesville?
Well, I think probably they're experiencing some depth issues. I mean, Mendenhall's a decent coach, but he's probably still trying to kind of break them in and get them kind of going. But, from that perspective, when you start hitting.
Yeah, go Jackets. All right.
There you go.
Disappointed last night, but
Well, what's the good word?
hell with Georgia.
All right. What's your first name?
Kent
From?
coming.
Kent from Cumming. He's here at Buffalo's, and we appreciate that on BuzzLine. And disappointed last night?
I'm friends with BuzzLine on Facebook.
Oh, awesome.
Excellent.
GoJackets.com Czar right there, Jonathan Leifheit.
There you go.
Yeah, it was tough, but hey, the schedule says they got to play Virginia this week, so let's see what happens with the Jackets.
I know everybody's talking about the rain.
Yeah.
Did that, but Clemson played the same way.
You're right.
That's what we said.
So Bronco Mendenhall, you said depth issues going on with him. Thanks a lot, Kent.
Yep.
Have they had a serious injury there?
No, not really. Probably just nicks and dings and that type of thing. The normal stuff you get over the course of the season. I haven't really paid that close attention to Virginia, but I just know as the season goes along, you usually get some attrition. Now, if it's a really bad year, like say North Carolina has, where I think they've had like 20 players out for a game recently, then that's horrible. But it's just kind of getting there. But this past weekend they played Pitt and pretty much got their butt handed to them. It was 31-14, and
Pitt's on the comeback.
Yeah, they are in the comeback. They're actually back up to 4-5 now, so they're kind of improving things. I thought they were going to compete with North Carolina for the cellar, and North Carolina has run away with that one. So. So
no sympathy from us on that. So.
No, none for me for North Carolina, none whatsoever.
Yeah. So with Virginia this week, matchups, compare them to anybody else that the Jackets have played thus far.
That they played thus far, probably they're going to be pretty fundamentally sound. So I would guess that they're going to be kind of a combination of maybe a Wake Forest combined with maybe kind of like Pitt a little bit in terms of kind of the level of play where they're at. But, of course, obviously they just got beat pretty good by Pitt. So, but they're going to be fundamentally sound. Mendenhall's a good coach. They'll do the things they need to do. But at the end of the day, Georgia Tech just needs to pound away at them and then try and pull away from them in the second half. What you don't want to do is let them hang around too long.
Okay. With Virginia Of course, this is a game. I mean, how do the Jackets put Clemson behind them and focus on? Okay, we can't play for a national championship. We can't even really play for an ACC championship. But
nope.
Last year was a pretty good consolation prize, you could say, with the way
Absolutely.
the season turned out. So how can they turn it around and have a similar season in 2016?
Well, I mean, and the same thing kind of happened last year. They got knocked out, kind of, I think by the end of September they were pretty much out of the race for the Coastal. And Coach Johnson looked at them and said, if you guys want to be a decent team, you still have some things you can do. You can win 9 games. You can get to a bowl and beat somebody. And he did a great job motivating them and kind of getting them ready to go. So I think they're in the exact same position right now. You have 4 games left in the season. You're sitting at 4-3. You've got 2 very winnable games, one at Virginia, one at Duke. You've got 2 tough games at home with Virginia Tech and UGA. But, even though I see UGA ranked at number 2, I don't fear them. I respect them, but I don't fear them. And Tech has played them tight all along, and we'll see if they're for real. Their schedule's been a little bit of a paper tiger, and we'll kind of see. Virginia Tech, same kind of thing. We play them tough every year, so there's not a team on this schedule left that they can't beat. But they're going to have to show up. They're going to have to play a lot better in terms of reads and doing what they're supposed to do on the field than what they did Saturday night. I'm also not too concerned about it putting it behind them. It wasn't like it was a heartbreaker or like it was going to dwell on it. They'll be able to flush that one pretty quickly.
But the Clemson deal is a problem that Georgia Tech needs to solve, not just for this year, but here.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, is it because they're just that good?
Well, I mean, let's face some facts here when it comes to Clemson. It's not like we're the only team they've been beating.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you'll see it. Florida State had a run, through the ACC. They were beating everybody in the 90s, and then they had, a couple years ago they were beating everybody. They went through, they won the national championship. Clemson's on another run right now. They've got some good players. They've been able to build on that, and that's the caliber they're on. And we've seen things go up, things go down. So Tech had a really good, was playing them really well and beating them pretty regularly, and just in the 2000s, and now they've turned it back on and are playing a lot better. They'll come back to earth, and you just got to make sure you're there to take advantage of it.
I think it's safe to say Chan Gailey was relieved of his duties because he couldn't beat Georgia.
That was probably the linchpin in terms of
what's it going to take for Paul Johnson if you can't get past Clemson for the pressure, not to be fired, but just more pressure on him.
Yeah, I don't think that if you were to be solid and win your share against Georgia, losing to Clemson's probably not going to be a job killer.
Okay.
So.
Well, they are good, and I hate to say it because I really don't like Clemson. So we'll give them credit. But I saw the numbers the last game that they had, and all the wins that they've amassed with Dabo Swinney. And
it's not just Georgia Tech that's losing to them.
Yeah, it's just not fair.
I agree.
All right, we'll come back. We'll wrap up this week's BuzzLine, and we'll talk a little basketball and, again, get you set for this exciting weekend of college football as Georgia Tech takes on the Virginia Cavaliers. This is BuzzLine from CRM Sports. Pardon me? Do you know what you want to eat? Are you helping out in this area? Okay, now we're going to put a food order in. You know what you want?
Yeah.
Okay.
Huh? No, don't worry. I'm not worried about that.
All right. We got our food order in. That'll be nice and ready for us when we get off the air. So apologize, Facebook Live viewers. And Kent came by. I wasn't expecting him to come by a few minutes ago, but luckily he was a Georgia Tech fan because I saw an LSU Tiger fan in there too, and I didn't want them to say something.
I smelled corn dogs.
So anyway, last thing I need to know to have is some LSU fan rattle our cages. They didn't play this weekend, so I don't want to hear it from the Coach O people. All right, last segment. We're back for the final segment of this week's BuzzLine. Thank you all for bearing with us here as we've picked each other up off the mat following a loss to Clemson and Buffalo's Cafe. Great place to come when you're having maybe a rough day at the office. Jonathan, if for no other reason, they've got a beer selection where 14 drafts are local craft beers.
That sounds good. If you're a beer drinker, that's probably the way you want to go.
Yeah, and, of course, they have those other beers that are more famous beers probably. But great friendly wait staff is here, and they've got 14 Metro Atlanta locations, Buffalo's Cafe, and we're at the coming location of Buffalo's Cafe where kids eat free Sunday and Tuesday. So, Jonathan, when we're in here on a Sunday and Tuesday, you're going to get to eat free with me.
Well, I've always been told I'm a little immature, so that'll work fine.
All right. Jacket basketball. Let's talk about something non-football for a minute. What's going on there? Because we're days away, I guess it is now, I would say hours, days away from the actual tip-off of the season.
Yeah, I believe it's next Thursday is the first game, and then they'll follow that up with a trip to Shanghai. So Georgia Tech and Georgia State got together to put together an exhibition game.
For hurricane relief?
For hurricane relief. Of course, Coach Pastner hails from the Houston area, which was obviously hit heavily by Hurricane Harvey.
Okay.
I believe he has some family members that were impacted, so kind of a personal matter there. So they played an exhibition game, and Georgia State actually came out on top 65-58. And I can hear the people scrambling and hollering and whoop and just all upset about this result. And I'm going to be here to tell you that I'd be the first to do the same. But Coach Pastner did not approach this game as a game he wanted to win. He approached it as a controlled scrimmage that he had certain things he wanted to do, and he didn't really care who won. So, as an example, I believe he went out there with a starting lineup that had 3 freshmen in it. Do you really think on opening night that's what we're going to have? Probably not.
Where was the game played?
McCamish, right there at Georgia Tech.
And how much heads up was given that this game would happen?
About 2 weeks. I think
Okay.
it was about 2 weeks.
This is a new rule the NCAA did this year.
No, it's not a rule. It's they did a waiver.
Okay,
so you could apply and get a waiver. So probably not something you can do in the necessarily next year.
I think it's a great thing.
Yeah,
and I only say that because did you hear what Kansas and Missouri did?
No, I did not.
They played in Kansas City in this same exemption deal. They had about 18,000 people in attendance.
That's awesome.
I don't know what this Georgia State
I'm not
game
sure
brought
what
in.
the attendance was. Obviously, it kind of conflicted with our trip to Clemson this past weekend. But it was a good idea, good thing, and I imagine that it was probably, given the number of Georgia Tech fans that headed to Clemson, probably was overrun with Georgia State fans a little bit. I mean, and now we'll get to hear about them crowing about winning an exhibition game for the next 20 years.
Well, that's another good thing about this thing because it really doesn't count.
It doesn't count. If it had counted, Coach Pastner would have had a completely different approach to it. And I just want folks to realize Coach Pastner said beforehand when we talked to him, he had a media session last week. I believe it was on Tuesday. And he indicated, he said, if this game counted, I'd approach it differently. This is going to be treated as a scrimmage, as a practice. He said, I'm going to run some scenarios. I'm going to do some things. Basically, he wanted to work on things for the season. So don't freak out about losing to Georgia State in basketball. There's basically nothing to see there.
Well, I will ask this question because I don't have all the past season schedules committed to memory. Is it pretty rare that Georgia Tech plays Georgia State?
It is, and actually Coach Pastner indicated that that's probably not a game that they would probably ever schedule either. So Not only has it been rare, but I can almost guarantee you it will continue to be rare. I think the last time Tech played them was probably back in the 90s. They had a coach that was good friends with Bobby Cremins, and Bobby would schedule them from time to time during the course of the 90s. But since that coach is long gone, and obviously Coach Cremins is now 18 years gone from Tech, neither of those factors are going to come into play.
We'll have to get him on the show sometime, if nothing else, just to hear him talk.
Oh, there are people in this world that are that you can talk about being jewels in terms of what a great human being they are, and Bobby is probably one of the nicest, most caring individuals I've probably ever encountered.
I have to ask him how he gets his hair that way too. Now, I'm not talking about being grazed. It's just kind of like I don't know how to explain it. I guess I'm just jealous. All right, Georgia Tech.
Yeah, next, he still has his, John.
Yes. Next for the Jackets, November 2nd, another exhibition game against Faulkner, and then they open up the season, as Jonathan mentioned, in Shanghai, China, against the UCLA Bruins, and that's going to be on November 10th, and that's a 11:30 p.m. Atlanta time tip-off. That's a long way to go for one game.
Yeah, the funny part is Georgia Tech does have a reason. It's probably a good trip for the players. But I'll also note that there is a former Georgia Tech player who has a significant presence in China and is very popular there. Stephon Marbury.
Okay.
He played in some Chinese leagues and was very, very popular there. And it wouldn't surprise me if some of that was related. I don't know that it is or isn't. I don't have any information about that, but it would not surprise me.
All right, first regular season game at McCamish for Georgia Tech is going to come on November 19th when the Bethune-Cookman Wildcats come in for a game at 2 p.m. Tip-off there against Bethune-Cookman. So, basketball, anything else basketball-related?
Not at this point. We have they actually did get another commitment this past week from another player, from another wing player, Khalid Moore out of Jamaica, New York. Maybe it wasn't Jamaica, New York. Another interesting connection there. He played for Archbishop Malloy.
Okay.
And for those of us that are familiar with that particular school, we would be familiar with it because that's where Kenny Anderson played his ball as well. So kind of reestablishing that New York connection that, as you mentioned, Coach Cremins, that he had back there in the 80s and 90s, and pulling in a player from New York.
What was the nickname of the trio?
The Lethal Weapon 3?
Yeah, you go. Lethal Weapon 3. Been a few years, but it'd be nice to have some kind of 20.
Yeah, I was still in college then.
Yeah,
John.
I was not in college. That's why I wasn't sure. I really had to dig out, blow the dust off of that name there. So, all right, Jonathan, what did the Jackets need to do to come back from Charlottesville with a win?
I think they need to play and execute their game a lot better than they did against Clemson. Make good reads, make good tackles, hang on to the ball. I think if you do all that, I don't think you have to do anything extraordinary to beat the Who's. You just need to play your game and not make any horrible mistakes and leave them in the game.
All right, important to get back on the winning side of the ledger. And we'll be back here next week to talk about it on BuzzLine. I want to thank Mike Hickman. I want to thank everybody here at Buffalo's Cafe for another great show, even though we're coming off a loss. And we'll be back next time to talk about it on BuzzLine. For Jonathan Leifheit, GoJackets.com. I'm John Rawls signing off and thanking you for being a part of this CRM Sports production. And Jonathan,
go Jackets.
We'll see you.